Welcome to the Dr. Tom Show. Today, I am really excited to have a great chiropractor with me, someone who just oozes enthusiasm for life as well as the profession. So I'm grinning like a Cheshire cat if you can see the YouTube. If you're watching on, or if you're listening on the podcast, hopefully you can hear the enthusiasm in my voice. But Glenn Jaffe is joining us from Carolina over in the States. He's been a chiropractor since 2003. He's been on the board of the North Carolina Chiropractic Association, finishing up serving as president for a term there, which is fantastic. He helps mentor new chiropractors as well as working with politicians. Outside of chiropractic, he loves photography, food, and culture, and spending time with his family. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, he's a Tottenham Hotspurs fan, which is strange for someone from Carolina, but you know what? Everybody's got their flaws. Glenn, thank you ever so much for joining us on the show. It's really such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for full disclosure, this is only my second season of following an EPL team. And you're not the only person who's told me that my choice of team was a very much of a head scratcher.
But you know what? The true testament to a football fan is that they follow them from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. So just stick with them and maybe one day they'll win the
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So Glenn, you're a chiropractor. You've been a chiropractor since 2003, which is amazing.
Yes.
But did you always want to be a chiropractor? How did you get into it? I'm intrigued to know how it's all started.
Well, so growing up, my parents, my dad was a dentist. My mom is a nurse anesthetist. My grandmother was a nurse. I have a lot of dentists in my family. And we used to also volunteer our time in ambulances to help in the community. So a lot of experience coming from the medical model, which over here in the States is very, very much driving everything. So I got to college and I was thinking about becoming a nurse and following kind of in my mom's footsteps of becoming a nurse anesthetist and kind of looking at it more as being in the business of healthcare and making a nice living and having status in society and all that other stuff. And I'm starting to get through this program in my undergrad studies, and I'm realizing that it's not what I wanted to do. The biggest thing about it for me was that I wasn't in a position to actually kind of decide how to take care of patients. And that challenge mentally really, really was what I wanted. And I wanted to be in more of a position of authority. And it wasn't an ego thing by any means, but it was just, I love the uniqueness of each person and to be able to kind of wrap your brain into that and kind of figure out how can I best help them. So I went home for a holiday between semesters one year and got adjusted for my chiropractor who my family had been seeing. And so he was asking me about how school was. And I told him that I was just really kind of not souring on it, but just was losing interest in becoming a nurse. And I was kind of looking at other things and becoming a physical therapist, maybe even going to medical school. And he said, well, have you thought about going to chiropractic school? And I looked at him and I was like, you know what? I hadn't even thought about that at all. So we did some more talking and I looked at several different schools and I looked at his school that he graduated from and I decided to go there. It was close to where I went to undergrad. It was in Chicago, so in a big city. And that school is, even though it's been around, it's the second oldest school that's still in existence. It's got a reputation of producing a specific kind of chiropractor. And at the time, I didn't really understand the difference when I got into school. And as we're going through school, you know, it's very medical, it's very diagnosis, it's very mechanical. There's no vitality really, you know, all those principles that we understand now to really kind of be true about chiropractic and the way we look at things, they just really weren't talked about there. So it's very mechanistic. And I didn't know any better. So I get out of school and I start practicing and I get involved with a group. And so I have some structure now and I'm like, well, here's how you do things. And I didn't know to ask why I was doing things. Mm-hmm. You know, when you get out of school, you just kind of, you're trying to keep your head above water when you're opening a practice, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, well, my dad had his own practice for so long. I mean, I can do it, right? So I get involved with this group and then they give you the blueprints and you do these things and there's all these scripts and forms and here's how you move patients through the office. And oh, by the way, here's a treatment recommendation. You tell everybody. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going through this and, you know, I grew up, it was a decent practice, you know, it was fine, but I was starting to feel unfulfilled. I was starting to feel like I was missing something. It just became so much of a grind. Like it wasn't fun. You know, you ever get that when you're walking around, it feels like an elephant on your back and it's, you can do it, but it's just like so laborious. And that's kind of where I felt. So about 4 years ago, I'm getting to the head of this all. And so Sherman College of Chiropractic is about an hour away from us. If you could take one school and make it 180 degrees from where I came from, it's Sherman. So I had resisted getting involved in learning from that kind of end of the pool for a long time because of where my school was and where I was coming up from. There was a lot of finger wagging about that school. You know, it's, oh, philosophy, bad. Well, podcasters, I'm holding up the cross sign like you were to a vampire. But, you know, and I don't even know if they have a copy of the green books on campus.
Yeah.
Like, I never even talked about that stuff. And we maybe spent half an hour learning about the origins of chiropractic, which if you don't understand where you're coming from, right, and why we do things now, how in the world are you going to understand where you want to go? Like, how are you even going to have an idea of what you're trying to create? So none of that stuff was ever taught to me. So about 4 years ago, I decided, all right, I need to do something different. Something told me I got to just get out of this and do something different, interrupt my pattern, right? So Sherman's having their Lyceum, which is, you know, all of us in chiropractic knows what those mean. So they had a bunch of speakers. And I sign up, I get the program. I have no idea who these doctors are because they're not in my sphere, right? I don't really know who any of them are, except maybe Terry Yoakum. He may have spoken at that one. Everybody knows Terry. So I get there and I walk in and I look at the schedule, and the first speaker is John Minardi. So coming from Metapractic University, his title really kind of was polarizing to me. It said the science of the subluxation complex. So I'm looking at this and I go, ooh, science. That's comfortable for me. Subluxation, ooh, bad. That's a bad word. That wasn't even said at my school, right? So I'm like, okay, let's do this. So all of you guys listening to this podcast, if you have no idea who John Minardi is, you need to go learn about this guy and consume everything he puts out there. If you're a chiropractor, even if you're not, you'll understand things to a completely different level. 3 hours later, Tommy, I was scribbling notes, shaking my head. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Why didn't they teach me this in school? What he did for me was to take me basically from one side of the street where it's so mechanistic and not understanding why we do what we do with the adjustment, or let alone chiropractic. And he walked it across the street. But because of where my brain was, I needed to, in the past, I needed to have my educated brain get on board with everything, right? If it wasn't justified with facts and figures and science and I couldn't see it for myself, feel it myself, I had trouble accepting it into my belief system. Mm-hmm. Now I get across the street and now John's taken all this stuff with science, but he's actually showing us how chiropractic is really doing what it says it does. And that DG and BJ were right. They just didn't have any way to show it because the technology and the science wasn't there. But now we have this here. So this is like blowing my mind. I'm like, oh my God, why didn't they teach us this in school? Now we know why, because whatever. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I get through that, and now I'm starting to understand why I'm telling people treatment plans and telling them why do I need to see you so much, because it's not a pain-based thing that we're doing here. Now, a lot of our patients find us because of that, but I was having this incongruency of telling patients, let's say, they come in and I say, well, I need to see you 3 times a week for the next 8 weeks, right? And I didn't really understand why I was telling them that. Somebody told me that's what you say, right? So the patient comes in, 6 visits, whatever, the pain's almost gone or whatever they're complaining about. And they go, well, doc, why do I need to keep coming back? And I would look at them and I'm like, I don't know, because you paid for it. It's like, that's not the reason you tell people that, right?
Yeah.
So I was having trouble growing my practice. And I really started to understand that, ultimately every patient that I want, every person that I experience in life, I want them to understand that our bodies, just as we know, have this amazing ability to heal and function at a high level. And I want that for every single patient that comes into my office. And my goal, I realized, was I want them to get to wellness care. I want them to get to this point of a higher state of health and then keep it there. But what I was doing over here was not congruent to where I wanted to go. And I started to understand that they were disconnected. So the next person who really kind of started to influence me and it's still influencing me, just like Minardi, is Tim Young. And I've known Tim for so long. And when I first met him, I was in this place over here at Metapractic University, and Tim, has such an amazing ability to talk about chiropractic, because he is, you squeeze him. I don't know if there's anybody else on this earth that oozes more chiropractic than him. I mean, Sigafus, those guys, Tim's our live model of that, right? So now I'm starting to understand why he's saying what he's saying, and it's so much more making sense to me. And this change is starting to happen. Now, along the same time with this, my daughters are born. Okay, so my first daughter, she's 9, and we're going through learning about. We use the Bradley method, which over here in the States is husband coached birthing. So the dad is really involved with the whole process. So it was taught by a nurse, and she's teaching us all this stuff about how labor and delivery kind of goes about, like step by step by step. And I'm like, well, wow, okay. She's taking this mechanistic explanation of the birthing process. And because she's a nurse and a woman and has 7 kids that she's all birthed at home, by the way, 5 by herself with her husband, which is amazing. She was able to really kind of, again, take the vitalistic approach to things and meld it with how we understand the mechanics of the human body. Man, Tommy, I tell you, as a guy sitting here in awe of a woman's body because of what she can do. And the watershed moment there for me was her body creates life and is the next generation. And really that's what we're all here for, right? It's to keep the race going. It's the next generation. Her body is created, designed, evolved, however you want to look at it, to do it perfectly, right? It's the word perfect stuck in my mind. And I'm like, well, if it's perfect, why do we want to do anything if it's working perfectly? Like, leave it alone. And her big thing was, if mama's okay and baby's okay, don't do anything. And that started to ring in my mind. I'm like, okay, well, if all this programming is in here, it's got to be right. So our oldest daughter was born. I caught her, put her up on my wife's chest. She was a water birth, and she's nursing, and I adjust her 5 minutes into it in the life, and it was just amazing. So fast forward to my second daughter. She's 7 now. So 2 years later, well, this is our there's always a kid that's a little bit more work than the other one, right? So she was presenting breech from about 30 weeks on, and we just, everything that I know how to do in chiropractic to try and influence her body to make that change just wasn't happening. We tried, my wife laying inverted, the frozen peas, the flashlight. I'm adjusting her, obviously, acupuncture. So we resigned ourselves to do an external version, which was our last resort. And our OB, who was very, very in tune with midwives and chiropractors and everything, she's like, look, this is really, I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't think this was the absolute last thing to try and avert a C-section. So we're like, all right, let's do it. So we try and get her to turn, and 15 minutes into this, nothing's happened. And she's like, well, I'm going to try one more time, and then we're done. So she like gets in there and turns. I don't know if you're familiar with an external version, but you're basically manually trying to turn the baby, if you can wrap your brain around that, right? It's kind of barbaric. So she gets her turned up to about 12 o'clock, and she lets go, and you can see my wife's stomach go, and the baby just bounced back to like horizontal. And we're just like, oh man. And at that point, I'm like, wow, my wife's gonna have to have the C-section, which you definitely want to try and avoid. But man, my daughter's in there stressing out about something. Like, I'm starting to think about things differently. So my wife fortunately goes into labor. So we start the cascade. We end up having the C-section, get my daughter out, put her on my wife's chest. She's nursing. I'm standing at the head of the table, taking pictures, just enjoying the moment. And the OB, who I know, she looks up from down below the drape, and she goes, hey, Glenn, look. And she holds up the umbilical cord. In the middle of the umbilical cord is a big, fat, loose knot. So for me right there, I'm like, oh my God, her body was so smart that it would not let that baby turn to pull that knot tight.
Yeah.
I get chills saying that to you, because that's what I felt. I'm like, unbelievable example of how amazing our bodies are and how perfect they are, and how they can do things. And they're so smart, right? What told her body not to do that, right? There's that intelligence again that I didn't get taught about in school, and that I've had to kind of learn about and understand. And it's been there the whole time, right? You just have to be in a position where you have to be ready to receive it. So that kind of all, man, just that all kind of started to come together. So
it's an incredible journey, and it sometimes takes life to smack us in the face sometimes, doesn't it, to reiterate. And I suppose we do need several interventions, I suppose, from different people to really help us grasp it. And you say you've got to be ready
Yeah.
to receive it. I believe the time is right when the time is right, because you were a chiropractor since 2003. So you did a few years in a different model. And I certainly spent my first few years in a different model. Um, and I suppose for those of you who are listening who don't necessarily understand the difference, one is a very medical approach and will try and be allopathic, the opposite of suffering, and reduce pain, which has a place, but it's not necessarily chiropractic. And then there's obviously, chiropractic, which is, a philosophy, science, and art of things natural, system of adjusting the spine. And I think you really are a champion of that. And the two people you have, John Minardi, who's like the Jason Statham of chiropractic, and then you have Tim Young, who's like the Rocky Balboa, just like giving you left, right, and I love it. And you're so enthusiastic with it. Tell me, what do you see as the potential for people who are under chiropractic care? What is the potential for those people?
That's such a great thing. And I kind of really reflect on that a lot, because I've gotten to this point now where I can understand that that's something to focus in on and understand it better. Because like I said, you've got to know where you're going, and you've got to have an idea, because just like with anything, if you don't have a goal in mind, you're just floundering. You're just taking action or doing something for the sake of being busy or taking action. And I was guilty of that. Nobody really taught me that. But to think about that you look at if you look at an infant, right? And maybe we've all had the opportunity to adjust an infant. The mom or dad brings the baby in, and there's a problem, right? And you look at that and they go, well, that baby has no idea why I'm about to do what I do,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you do it, and you hand the baby back, and then you let things happen, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, that baby has zero expectation of what I'm giving it. So if we can understand that and go, if our bodies are able to take what we give them, good and bad, and act on it, wouldn't we want to do things to make the body act on things in the best way possible, and to reduce or eliminate or remove those things that are causing it to respond in a negative way, right? We're all programmed that good, bad, right? Pain, pleasure, hot, cold. It's so easy to observe contrast and to learn from that. And the greater you can get that contrast between the two things, I think it's even easier to see the difference. And to be able to know where in our countries is probably similar to over there in the UK. Just the picture of health is not ideal. Let's just say it that way, right? It needs a lot of help. It needs different points of view, and it needs different input, and it needs to see that, we were able to survive as a species before the medical model came about, and before all these prescriptions. Were people dying because these drugs weren't here? Sure. Were the advances in technology and surgery and understanding those things helping to improve the longevity of life and improve the quality of life? That's up for debate. But chiropractic and the principle behind it, it's that the understanding of how life is. It's been there since the beginning of time. So if you have this infinite possibility that the body can thrive and do things amazingly, then we need to do everything we can to allow that to happen. Because life it's meant to be lived and experienced. It's not meant to be like a drudge that you go through every day. And when I have patients that come in the office, I used to be so focused in on why are you here? What's hurting this? What's causing this pain? Like the whole mechanistic look. But now I'm like, man, what is this patient going to get back in their life if we're able to get their body to work better and get this out of here? And so now they're not spending all of this energy and time and everything else, woe is me, versus, man, look what I can do now. And we all need to be like this, right? We're all the same. We all have it inside of us. It's just, if you don't know that it's in there, and nobody's ever given you permission to do it, that is another thing that I realized, that I need to give myself permission to do these things and think these things and say these things. that really it's everything's possible, right? I mean, if you think that you can, put on a cape and fly around the earth, who knows if it's impossible or not, right? But I'm not going to sit here and tell you can't do it. That's not my job. My job is just to let you go do whatever. But sometimes things get in the way, and it's one of those things that you hear all the time, that simplicity is the enemy of execution.
Yeah.
Well, if we can just look at things and go, well, if we can just do this one little thing, and then something that you don't have control about or I don't have control about, it's going to take over and it's going to take you where you need to go, then let's do that. Let's not worry about what's going to happen or where we're going to go. We just know that that's what we're supposed to be at. And it sounds like we're talking in, big ethereal terms and not being really specific, but it's the possibility of life that people can experience when we change things. That's kind of where I'm understanding now that's driving me.
I agree. And I think we should talk in ethereal terms because we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what the possibility is until we try.
Yeah.
I think Reggie Gold said this in one of his things. He said, think of a color you've never seen before. Like, it's impossible until you've seen it.
Yeah.
And like you say, when you were back before your 4 years ago, before your watershed moment, asking patients to keep coming in, yet you didn't know why. And I like to say to people, they come in banged up and I say, they tell me they just want to feel how they did before the car crash. And I say, well, what if your life actually sucked before the car crash? We don't know how good we're meant to feel or how we're meant to express until we start to get there. And even there isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's just a constant journey. How have you seen chiropractic, help you with, you're very much a family man. And how have you seen chiropractic help your kids, I suppose, in comparison to some of the kids you see their age at the same time? I'd love to hear your view and experience on that.
It's observing that contrast again. And, my kids, like a lot of kids that are under regular care, especially from the get-go in life, my kids are they're alive. And like I said, my younger daughter, she's the one who sometimes takes a little more work. I mean, they just are like nonstop. And they're into things. They're always creative and drawing and having fun and playing. I mean, they're at the age now, they're 7 and 9, where my 7-year-old still kind of is playing with dolls a lot. And you can see her, you can hear her from the other room. She's in there and just playing away by herself for an hour at a time with all these dolls and stuffed animals and things. And she's playing school or playing horse camp or anything. And then my 9-year-old's over at the other table, she's into crafts and doing things, and they play together. They're hardly sick. They're alive. They're vibrant. It's like you said with the car crash example. So many times patients are so focused in on, or parents are so focused in on, man, I just make sure that my kid is not sick. Well, why don't we look at it differently and go, well, why don't we do things so that they're healthy and they're alive and they're vibrant?
Yeah.
Right? Not sick. That sucks, like you said. Oop. I'm looking outside my window here. There's birds all over the place. The trees are green. There's a breeze. The grass is green. It's not stupid hot here today. But it's like, if I wanted to be not sick, I could look out there in the middle of February when the trees don't have any leaves on it and the grass is kind of brown and there's mud and there's no birds because they've all gone south. That's not sick, right? But that's not really vibrant. That's not alive. I want alive. I want to see birds. I want to hear birds. I want to smell the air. And I look at the kids that are like that, and that's where they are. And my kids, man, they're it's almost like they're going all over the place, and man.
I love what
so
you just said. I think you've just summed up the difference between Metapractic and chiropractic. Focus on not being sick versus focus on being alive and vibrant. I haven't heard it said that well, Glenn. So thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, you've come on a journey. You've been involved politically. I have too, and that runs its time for all of us, I think. But you help young docs come up. You work a little bit with politics. What do you want to see as your contribution over the next decade, or what would you like to get into, or what legacy would you like to leave with those sort of next 10 years?
I think if we can continue to get past focusing in on our differences, our profession is famous for, as we've all heard, of circling the wagons and shooting in on each other. And while I think 10 years is a long period of time, I don't think that that's enough time to change that. And I don't think that process is something that I even want to try and get into, because I don't think it's my opinion. I don't think I'm going to be able to change that. So I don't want to waste my energy and time on that. I want to focus on things that I know that I can make a difference in. And it starts with my community here and in my state. And that's why I've gotten involved politically in my state association and working with the National Chiro Congress as well. We want to get more people in more offices. because the more people that are under regular chiropractic care, the healthier our population will be, the better life will be. And these kids that are growing up, right? Like I said, that's what we're here for. It's to set the table for the next generation, right? So we have to find this balance about enjoying life and being selfish a little bit and you know, this gift that we've been given of life. But then we also understand we're setting an example for the next generation. So what are we doing? What are they seeing us do? And 10 years is enough time to have the ability to show them with action what we're doing. And also to course correct, because like you said, you know, we don't know what the future is going to be, but if we don't start doing things and then kind of looking back and going, okay, well, what result did this produce? Is it giving us the direction that we want to go? Then what you know, don't keep doing it. Right. So to understand that that conversation needs to happen, but just to continue to lead by example, right? The more people that we can show that this is something they need to have in their life, and with our kids and the younger generations, and we can really start to see it. You know, I mean, you and I are both in practice. Our patients are getting younger, right? They're just out of college. Like this past month, most of my patients, crazy enough, they were all under 35, almost all of them. Like, I don't even remember the last time I had somebody that was, you know, here in the States, we have Medicare. It's not that they don't need that care. It's not that I wouldn't treat them. But you're starting to see it. It's starting. So if we can keep that going the next 10 years, and I really think that the students coming out of school really need to hear that. They need to hear good messages. They need to understand that they're getting into something that can make a difference. Because when you come out of school, it's gloom, doom, insurance audits. You can't do this. People are going to turn you in if you don't say this, if you don't do 19,000 orthopedic tests. You know, that's not what it's about. It's about connecting with people and showing them what to do. And if we can continue to do that, and I like having that conversation, because nobody did that for me when I got out of school and when I was in practice. You know, like I said, like you said too, you know, if you're not ready to receive it, it's going to either go over your head or you're going to resist it, which, gosh, maybe that's the reason why we just continue to circle the wagons, is people just resist hearing something that's different, and they want to fight. And it's about survival. And if we can get out of that scarcity mindset and we get into that abundance mindset, and we can think about propagation instead of survival, man, anything is possible. Any kind of change is possible. And if we can do that, then that really, I think, would be worth the work. But starting in our offices in my community is really, you know, that's the best place.
I completely agree. I think action speaks louder than words. You're absolutely right. It's nice to see that that's happening all around the world, and it's brilliant to see that. I've got a lot of enthusiasm from today, and you've rekindled a fire inside my heart. So thank you so much. I'd love to know if there's any final words of wisdom or a bit of advice that you could leave our audience with.
Yeah. And let me share a story that might help with that. So coming from my Metapractic background, chiropractic philosophy was poo-pooed, right? And I held that belief. I had that story in my head for so long. And the more I got around the people that I saw were doing things that I wanted to do and that spoke to my heart, I started to study them to see, what are they doing? What are they reading? Who are they surrounding themselves with? How do they live their life? How do they talk to people, right? And you start modeling those kinds of things. And I was very resistant to chiropractic philosophy for so long. And I finally realized that I have to learn about this. I have to understand it. And I have to go into it with an open mind and not resist it. And I have to understand that whatever I get from it is what I'm supposed to get from it. If it goes over my head or it doesn't speak to me or whatever, then that's fine, whatever. But I need to start with it. And I'll give Tim Young all the credit in the world for this. He really, really emphasized the importance of, you know, getting into that and learning about it for you and figuring out how you can use it to grow yourself as a chiropractor, but as a person too. And I found a book that really helped me with that. So if there's anybody that's listening to this that is kind of in the same place of like, doesn't understand how we can take our chiropractic philosophy and use it in our practices. I don't know if some of you are familiar with, obviously, the green books, but there's a blue book that Strauss started writing, and it was called Chiropractic Philosophy. The biggest thing that I found struggling with green books was that they were written in antiquated language and in BJEs, right? So Strauss took Stevenson's textbook, which again I tried reading it and it was hard to read.
Hard
Let's just
work.
call it what it is, right? It's hard to read. It's an exercise in pontification. There's a lot of meat in there, but it's all, and I started reading Strauss's book. And what he did was he took Stevenson's book and he rewrote it in modern language. And it was published in 1994. So some of the references culturally are a little outdated, but it's so much more easy to understand. And if you're struggling with that, to understand what are we doing in our profession, as Tim would tell us, as one of my mentors, you got to know who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And that why you do it part is everybody has to figure that out on themselves. So you have to figure out that why. And I'm reading this Strauss book, and I'm modeling all these people that I see are doing things that I feel congruent with, and it's all starting to come together. So you've got to, I guess, to summarize it, you got to figure out your why. You've got to find the tools to help you get there. And you got to find people that are going where you want to go, and you got to run with them and shut everything else off that isn't, because man, the world needs what we got. And there's not enough of us right now that are able to give it. The population's growing. The number of chiropractors to serve the communities is not keeping up. We got to do something about that. And the more we're able to serve our communities, the better things will be. Just starts at one patient at a time. So that's kind of, yeah.
I love that. Such a great insight and practical for people to take home. I think what I'm going to take home from this, Glenn, is I think we're going to form a great friendship, and I'm going to obviously rub shoulders with you a bit more, because it's really selfishly helping me. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have to say one more thing. Last year when I heard you speak, when I met you, you on my journey, you are a very important part of this journey for me. So thank you for everything that you taught me that you probably don't even realize, but thank you for that. I really do appreciate that.
I'm humbled, and I appreciate hearing that. Thank you. And if more people want to find out some more about you and get in touch, how can they get in touch with you and find out more?
Sure. So I'm also learning to the point that social media is useless except for getting the word out about your practice and your principles and everything. So on social media, you can find me on Instagram at Jaffe Chiro, the letter C, the letter L, the letter T. There's how you spell my name if you're watching the webcast or the webinar. So that's my social media handle on Instagram and also on Facebook. And then I also have a page, Glenn Jaffe DC, I think it is. But if you just search for me there on social media, you'll find me and drop me a message, and I'll get to you. But I'd love to connect. If anybody has any stories, I love listening to stories of this journey that I've been on, because the more I hear it from me, the more it helps me understand my journey too. And to realize that, it's okay to come from where you were, and to realize, okay, something's changing. Let's follow it. And so if you've got something, I would love to talk to you, connect with you, hear your story too. So I think that's one of the best part about being alive, is sitting around and listening to people tell stories. So especially with a nice pint. So
good, man.
Which one of these days I'm going to get over to your country and we're going to do that. And man, between everything that happened this year and whatever, man, just between you and Benny and his little train, there's so much to see over there.
There is. That train, man, you got to get over there as well. He's got a castle. You got to see it. So thank you very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it, Glenn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dude, that was great.